we're gonna, if you've been in this room for 2 sessions, I apologize, you're gonna listen to me again. I'm Nicole, I'm one of the founders of KCIA. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. So I do some of the emotional aspect, I do some of the planning for everything, and then I'm also an adoptive mom. So I'm gonna, since I don't have the way to know where you guys all are in your thoughts on adoption or your journey to adoption, I'm gonna give just a brief overview of everything that kind of involves adoption. And then we have adopted families who have all chosen different methods, who are gonna be up here, they'll tell you their success story, but then they're also gonna be available for questions. And as we go through, I just encourage you all to think of the nitty-gritty questions or anything that's just laying on your heart when you think about adoption. Because we've all come up here because we're willing to be open books, and I wish that somebody had been an open book to me when I was considering adoption. So just let us know what we can do and how we can help you. I kind of have to say, if there's anybody in this room who either your spouse drug you in here because they're ready to adopt and you're not, or you just came here like, oh, I don't want to get to the adoption portion of it because I don't know what to expect and I'm not interested. Just know that those are so common. And I tell the story, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to share it with you because it just tells how low you can get. I really started feeling in my gut that adoption was what we were supposed to do when it came time to decide IVF or adoption. But I so was clinging to that hope of a biological child that one of these lovely books over here, I was reading through it one day and it was all about adoption. And I knew that was my message, that we were supposed to go through adopt. And I threw that book across the room and I screamed out loud. I don't remember if my husband Jason was in there or not, but I screamed out loud, I am not effing gonna adopt! And then I think we brought our son home like a year later. And I wouldn't trade him for the world. So it all turns out how it's supposed to turn out, but we want to help you process everything that you're going through when you think about it. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about, and it is an amazing experience, but it is super stressful, just like all the rest of infertility. If you're just starting, these are a few terms that you need to know, because as you go through anything related to adoption, you're probably going to hear some of these things, and some of these things may be on your mind. The adoption triad is a term that comes up to just describe the 3 parts of the adoption process: the child, the birth parents, and the adoptive parents. An open adoption is an adoption where you're going to have some level of contact with the birth parent, whether all you do is meet them before they give birth, be with them in the hospital, and then you never hear from them again, or whether you're seeing them, 4 times a year to have the child be around the birth parent. So a lot of adoption these days is open, but there are still some closed adoptions. Closed adoption means you're going to have no level of contact between the birth and adoptive families. Most of the time you're not going to ever even know. You won't meet them at the hospital, the baby will just come home with you, or you'll pick the baby up at the agency. That doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to. All the people that you hear searching for their birth parents, there was a lot. 30, 40 years ago, almost everything was closed. We have an open adoption. Our birth mom came to our house. I went to all of her doctor's appointments with her, so that does happen. Your profile. If you decide to start seeking adoption, you're going to put together pictures and stories, and depending on what route you're taking, it just depends, but everything about you that you would like to try to tell somebody in just a few pages what your life looks like. So that's what a profile is. Some of them will call them your adoption book. Home studies, when the social worker comes and visits your family. Normally they'll meet with each spouse separately, and then they'll also come together and meet with you to discuss everything. They're going to talk about everything, your backgrounds, what you hope to be as parents, as a couple, what your feelings on infertility were, how you've gone through infertility. It's designed to give the court the picture of who you are. It's not to let the birth family have all that information about you. The birth family should not ever see your home study. ICPC, the Interstate Compact on Placement of Children, if you start looking outside of the state, that's going to happen, and especially since we're so close to the Kansas-Missouri side, depending on the agency, it's very likely you could get a baby on either side of the state line. So it's basically one state telling the other state that the baby's been born and going to move to their state. If you're, let's say you have the baby in Florida, normally you can't bring that baby home until ICPC is completed. So the paperwork has to get from Florida to Missouri and be approved. And then you can travel home. Normally that means if you adopt out of state, you're going to be in that state for a week to 2 weeks. Hopefully it's not going to go over 3. Birth parent consent. This is the paperwork that when you've been matched with a child and the baby's born, all you want is for this part to be completed. The birth parent is showing their choice to place for adoption. And in Kansas, this is a legal document. Kansas is a very adoptive parent-friendly state. Once the birth parent signs that legal document, or that document, it becomes a legal document and is irrevocable unless they can prove fraud or something like that. In Missouri, they cannot even sign it. I'm sorry about that static noise. I don't know what's causing it for sure. I'll switch off the microphone if we have to. In Missouri, those birth parents cannot even sign the consent paperwork, or cannot give consent until 48 hours after the adoption, and it has to take place in a court. They have to go to court, one or both birth parents, to give their consent. And then after that 48 hours, it cannot be revoked for any reason, unless, again, fraud or coercion. So these are kind of just the steps to finding your child. You want to explore all the types of adoption. You may already know what your options are, but if you don't, there's kind of 4 basic types: domestic infant adoption, foster to adopt, embryo adoption, and international adoption are kind of the big ones that we'll talk about. Who's feeling domestic infant adoption? So if you've decided to adopt domestically, that means you're probably hoping for a newborn. Some agencies consider newborns under 2 months. If you're going to register with an adoption agency, you are going to go to them. They're going to basically do everything for you. They're going to help you find the attorney. They're going to do your home study. They're going to give you all the information you need to know about the process. They're going to be with you every step of the way. The birth parents are going to come to them. They're going to help the birth parent choose the adoptive family. They're going to walk you through every step. There are some attorneys in the area that, and I just realized I didn't hand out. Did you guys get a packet of information in your folder about adoption? Because I need to, hey Jason, will you go see if you can find Allison and ask her where those are? Because I have packets of all the adoption agencies in the area, plus some outside of the area, and then all the different consultant facilitators that have information too. But there are some attorneys here who do contact birth parents contact them, so you can also choose a private attorney. They will need to use a social worker to get your home study done, but the rest of it, they can handle too. One of the questions that comes up a lot is an adoption consultant versus an adoption facilitator. They are different. An adoption consultant is normally around $1,500 to $2,500 maybe. They have contacts all over the United States usually that work with different agencies. They will know about situations with those agencies, and they will help you make connections to get your profile in front of those agencies, even if you're working with an agency here in Kansas City. A facilitator is someone who can sometimes not be allowed in certain states. It's illegal to use a facilitator in certain states, but they work directly with birth parents. So they do facilitate adoptions. They work with birth parents and adoptive parents. So that's the biggest thing. A consultant will never actually have any contact with a birth parent. They will just refer you to the agency that has contact with the birth parent. Private situations, that means that you have spread the word to everybody that you can possibly spread the word to, and somebody calls you up and says, hey, so-and-so is pregnant and they're looking to adopt. Are you guys interested? You say, yes, we're interested. You meet with the birth parent, you talk to the birth parent, and they say, we want you to raise this child. Private adoption is a pretty affordable method of adoption, and it does happen. It's amazing how many adoptions happen by word-of-mouth connections, so keep that in mind. Foster to adopt in Kansas, there's a phone number. You guys should all have copies of this PowerPoint too, so that you'll have these phone numbers. If you're interested in foster to adopt, then you can do it in Kansas or Missouri, depending on where you live. Midwest Foster Care and Adoption is in Missouri. They're an agency that works with family division, so those are both different ways, and we do have a foster to adopt success story, so you'll be able to ask questions of them. Foster to adopt, the biggest issue is that a lot of times when you become a foster parent, you don't know what that child's situation is going to be. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when you have a child placed with you as a foster parent, you don't know that that child is going to become your forever child. So you need to really evaluate where you are emotionally in the process of wanting a child before you look at that option. Foster to adopt is extremely affordable way, and I do have several friends, one of who is presenting the Faith and Infertility session, who has done the foster to adopt option for all three of her children. International adoption, just a couple of things. There's also agencies in your packet about that. There's not as many international adoption agencies as there are domestic adoption agencies. You just have to look at the countries that are allowing adoptions into the United States and decide what country you're interested in. Each country has guidelines on what ages a lot of the children are, what special needs they see most often, and then you need to decide what age of child that you're willing to consider. Many of the embryos that are frozen after in vitro are suddenly becoming up for adoption if families decide that they're ready to place those embryos because their families are complete. Just if it's really, really important to you to experience pregnancy, this might be an adoption method for you to consider. Because then you still get to go through the pregnancy, you're still in control of what goes into your body. You know that those people who created these embryos were doing everything they possibly could to get pregnant and be successful. And then you're going to get the detailed information on the health and background of the genetic family. There are still some embryo donation programs where they're not completing a full adoption once the child is born. Chris does a lot of work that just spoke in here. Chris Barbasco, she does a lot of work with embryo adoption. And it is in your best interest to make sure that if you go through embryo adoption, once that baby's born, you complete the actual adoption in a court of law. And not going to say anything would happen, but if that baby has been legally adopted by you, then you've covered all your bases. Next step is to research the costs. The costs vary so much for all these different options. Domestic adoption could be as low as $7,000, could be as much as over $50,000. One of the things that differs is different states have different laws on what birth parents can have as compensation during their pregnancies. Missouri does not allow for a lot of birth parent support, so birth parent costs don't go skyrocketing. Florida allows birth parents to ask for whatever they want. I don't know if we're 100%, I think Texas is still in that position. And there are a few moms who, that's their job, is they just continue producing and placing their child for adoption because they can make money that way. So that's something to consider is when you look at what agency you're going to use or where, costs can skyrocket when you're looking at no limit on birth parent costs. Foster to adopt, again, you're going to have very minimal cost. International is pretty much $25,000 to $35,000 average. That's kind of set. And then embryo adoption is $10,000 to $15,000. A frozen embryo transfer runs about $4,500, so the actual transfer of that embryo is part of that cost. Then you have to gather information from all the agencies, attorneys, facilitators. I encourage you to gather as much information as you can. A lot of it's online, so look online. And then I say narrow it down to your top 3 and make appointments to meet with them in person, because you need to know if their personality and their values is going to match with yours, because you don't want to get stuck registered with somebody that you don't mesh with. We narrowed it down to our top 2. I had home study appointments with both of those scheduled for the following day, and I literally had to get up that morning and call the one that I decided not to do a home study with, because it was last minute before I could decide what direction we wanted to go. And always write down your questions to take with you when you meet with any professional. Even if you're still going through infertility treatment, please write down your questions before you go. Because when you get in those offices where your heart's beating and you don't know what's going to happen, you can't remember everything you're going to ask. And the last thing you want to do is walk away and think, I didn't get my question answered. Then you're going to need to complete your home study regardless of what path you decide to go down. Some people are going to tell you horror stories about their home studies. I promise, most of the time it's really not as scary as they make it sound. I can say that because I'm a social worker. I don't do home studies, but you just have to be open and honest. And they're not, I have friends and they're like on the floor with a toothbrush in their bathroom scrubbing the tile. And I'm like, I am not going that far. She can see my house vacuumed and dusted, but I'm not going to scrub the tile that much. They're not going to judge if you have a speck of dirt in your house. They're just there to make sure that it's a safe place for the child. Then you're going to have to wait for your match. Domestic adoption is an average of 1 to 2 years. Foster to adopt, it could vary widely. If you find out about a baby or a 5-year-old who is already, the parental rights have been relinquished and the state's looking for an adoptive family, you may get to adopt quicker. If you're waiting for the parental rights to be terminated by the state, you may have to wait longer. International adoption, same thing, varies widely. You could be on, and each country has a different waiting list, so make sure you look at that. And if you're interested in special needs, sometimes international adoption will already have the baby ready to go. They have a special needs baby that they need to get placed, and that goes really fast. And don't be completely scared of special needs when you look at all of this, because sometimes special needs are something that's extremely correctable once you get the child to the United States. So I don't want that to frighten anybody. Sometimes it's a quick way to work through an adoption process. Embryo adoption depends on the program, but you'll likely be matched within 2 to 6 months, and it's just getting your frozen embryo scheduled, the transfer scheduled. While you're waiting, you're going to look at preparing for your child. What's your leave policy like at work? If you're going to have to travel, what will you take with you? What purchases are you going to make before the child arrives, or do you need to make? Do you need to have a car seat? Do you need to have diapers? Are you going to tell others and go ahead and celebrate before? Like, are you going to have a baby shower if you know you've been matched? Go ahead and start thinking about that, because a lot of your friends and families are going to want to celebrate with you because they know you've been waiting, and they're going to want to have those celebrations before. We chose not to, we didn't want any celebration before the baby was born. We wanted the baby in our hands and parental rights relinquished before that happened. And then when you decorate the child's room, for some people it's very therapeutic to go ahead and work on the room, and that's, you know, you're preparing it for your child. I was like ordering bedding and keeping it in a box for a month before he was supposed to come. And then the best part happens, and that's meeting the child that's meant to be yours. And I promise, if adoption is the road that you decide to go down, when you meet that child, you're going to be like, I am not grieving my genetic child, I just want this child. This child's the one that was meant for me, and if I had to trade him in, I wouldn't do it. If somebody could tell me I could get pregnant right now with a biological child, you're not going to have thoughts of, oh, I'd rather get this baby back and I'll take that biological child. So now we just have 4 couples tell you about getting to meet their children and the processes that they went through. Let's see, I've got to switch. Now we know this is going to be complicated for me too because I'm so technology. Oh, look, it wasn't as hard as I thought. All right, if you guys will just come up, what we're going to do is they're going to tell their stories, and then we're going to sit up here, and any questions that you guys have or any thoughts that you have, please just go ahead and ask them, because this might be the only chance you get to ask this many people with this much experience the questions and concerns that you have. Jason, you want to come up too? This is Kyle and Megan Chapman. Their little picture is on the screen right now. But you guys want to turn one of those on and see if it works. I will let them go first.
I'm Megan, this is my husband Kyle. That's Easton. He just turned 1 on April 4th. So basically our story was 3.5 years of infertility. We tried 3 rounds of Clomid with IUI, 1 round of injectables with IUI, took a break, switched doctors, 1 IVF just to find out what was wrong, like we were unexplained. And then the 1 round of IVF to find out what the problem was, which was that I have an immune system, it's called something, we all have immune systems. An immune system problem where it's called anti-cardiolipin, something like that. Basically my body kills anything. So kind of like in the Monica and Chandler clip, the inhospitable environment. So after that, we attended a seminar with American Adoptions in Overland Park. That was in June 2012. Our decision to choose domestic adoption, we wanted a newborn. We wanted to be able to experience what it was like as close to the beginning as possible. And international adoption just was not for us, just because of the time constraints of the traveling. Okay, like I said, June 2012 was our seminar. It took a couple of months to really decide if that was the agency we wanted to use, because they presented their information so well, we just didn't want to jump right in. But we chose them because mainly their big thing was if the birth mother changed their mind, then they would get your money back. And that was a lot of money to invest if we weren't going to get our child. So September and October 2012, we started working on our profile, and they give you a list of questions to consider, like race or the medical background of the birth parents, substance abuse, anything like that. And that took a while to really, like we asked nurses, you know, what kind of substances are, you know, do you see in the NICU and all of that, what's really bad, what's not so bad, just to get an idea. So we worked on the pictures, the stories that go with it. Finished that up in November, December. We did our home study, fingerprints, background check, all of that takes a while. And then we had to do a video. That's something special that American Adoptions does, is they do a video that is on YouTube. You can look it up, and that's what a lot of the birth moms see. They get to see what you're like, rather than just looking at your profile and reading it. They can see how you interact and how you take care of your nieces and nephews, something like that. Then we went active. We had to get all our finances in order, and we were active in January 2013. And we waited 2 months. It was March 20th when we got the call, and we had 2 weeks to prepare. So it was not a lot. It was enough time to just have a little bit of anxiety and not really know what's about to happen, but not enough to where you're constantly thinking about it. Yeah, that's when we threw together our nursery. We packed. We had to get everything in order, and then April 3rd we met the birth mom, and April 4th I got to be in the surgery room when he was born. No, keep going. So the price of it, Nicole had mentioned that the cost of domestic infant adoption can be upwards of $50,000, and ours cost about $45,000. But that includes, that did not include travel though.
Yeah, it was everything but travel.
Yeah. It's really, really expensive. Home study experience, like she said, is not that big of a deal at all. Our house was clean. If you have firearms, make sure they're in a safe. A fire extinguisher, that was weird to me, but they checked that we had trash service, that our water was working. It was little things like that that you would not even think of. So, but it's not at all what people make it out to be. So. The traveling for domestic adoption is, we went to Corpus Christi, Texas. So we decided to stay in a vacation rental property because a hotel is just not cool. So it gave us the more comfort of home. We could make our own meals, do our own laundry. It was a long drive to think about stuff, and then we talked to the birth mom on the phone on the way down there. You're just really in this bizarre world of, I have no idea what to expect. Am I driving all this way down there for her to change her mind? I mean, that was all I could think about.
Megan hit on a lot of other things. One of the big things I worry about is the paperwork side of it, the financial side of it. I mean, the paperwork is more so than buying a home or a mortgage or anything like that. And with us, since we adopted out of Texas, our agency basically subcontracted a secondary agency. So all the paperwork we had to fill out a second time. And of course, it was their paperwork that we had to fill out. So it is a lot of writing and basically accounting for every asset you own, your home, your vehicles, your toys, anything that you have that's of value. They do dig into everything quite in depth, but it's really not that big of a deal. Read carefully, understand exactly what you're getting into when you're, when do you have to have the finances prepared, when do you have to have the money wired over, things like that. The profile part of it wasn't that hard. It was just collecting pictures, and we live in a digital age, so pictures and everything we have on our phones and in our pockets all the time. But for me, it was an incredible experience because we got to be down there. I was in the waiting room while Easton was being delivered via C-section. Megan was in the room. She was the first one to hold him. Our birth mother was very open and honest, actually kind of overly honest. She was very blunt. But yeah, I mean, she just wanted to know the truth. She didn't want, some flowery story about, she knew she wanted to place her child for adoption, and these were the criteria she had, and she made no bones about anything that she wanted. So that was great for us because she wasn't wishy-washy, she wasn't uncertain. She knew what she wanted, and she was going for it. So, and our adoption is open, semi-open. We talk to her every few months or so. We're going down there in June to Corpus, or May down to Corpus to visit with her and her 2 daughters for the first time since he was born. So about a once-a-year visit for us. So if there's any questions anyone has at the wrap-up of everything after the rest of the couples go, we'd be more than willing to share our experience, our story, anything anyone wants to know. So, okay.
I just want to add that when I went through this, I know I spoke with Megan about this and a few other people, but I was told to be open to any kinds of races and you can say that you would be okay with it, but you really have to be okay with it. It can move your process along quicker, but you want to make sure that you're comfortable with it. And the same with the medical and the substance, like really just do your homework on that stuff. Okay.
Great. I don't talk.
One more. There we go. Oh, that's you? That's not. Oh, there we go.
You notice he handed the mic straight to me. I am Shelley, and this is my husband, Jamie McCain, and we've been a couple since we were 15 years old. So we always knew that we would eventually have kids. So after being married and going through lots of infertility, gosh, it was like our 3rd month or something, and on the way home I was like, I so don't want to do this anymore. He said, I'm glad, because I was done with it like 2 months ago. So I was like, okay, well, let's just look into adoption. So we started just researching and asking friends and family, exactly, what process they've been through and kind of their experience. And just like you guys, you're just out here just kind of seeking knowledge. And obviously we all have different stories, so feel free to contact us. And I know that I think this ends around 12:30-ish, so if you need to ask Allison or Nicole or Megan or somebody about our email or something, feel free to, because we've shared our stories so many times. I always leave going, I didn't tell them or I forgot. So we decided to go through the Lighthouse, so we actually filled out some paperwork, and they told us that we'd be on a 2-year waiting list, and it was around 20 grand, and we were like, okay, great, so we'll just start saving. But in the process of that, my mother-in-law actually knew a foster parent, and she had a little boy who was going to be adopted, and it fell through, and did we just maybe kind of want to meet him? We're like, sure, that's great. So we went to meet him. He was a fetal alcohol syndrome baby and biracial. Supposedly he's fetal alcohol. He got straight A's just this last quarter. But so we went and saw him, and it seemed like everything was going to work out. So what we actually did is, even though he was a warden of the state, because that fell through because he actually went into state custody through the state of Missouri, we just hired a lawyer and kind of just went under the radar and just paid all this money towards like some of the agency we had to pay some money towards, and just lawyer fees and stuff. So from the moment we got our home study until we got our son was 3 weeks. So yeah, so it was very fast, but we just know that God's in control, so we just kind of just prayed and just followed him, and we got him on Christmas Eve. It's 2003, so is when his final adoption was. So with the state of Missouri, in 6 months, they actually come back and you go back to court and they finalize everything. So that's our first adoption story. The second one is we actually started pursuing again, thinking, well, we want to adopt again, and kind of start walking the path. Well, some people were saying, have you guys ever thought about fostering? And we're like, no, we don't really want to do that because that's kind of scary. Babies come into your house and then they leave and then your hearts get broken, and I just didn't think I was set up for that. But we did know it was a lot more inexpensive. So we were like, well, maybe we'll go to the classes and we'll do foster to adopt only. So we thought, well, we'll kind of go in through that. So we went and took all the classes, and every time they walked past us, they said, foster, what? Oh, I forgot.
The classes are the Stars and Spalding, which are through the state, which Midwest, that one that she had up there that I don't know the name of, you need to contact them. They all through them now. But you have to take all these classes. It's 9 weeks worth of foster parenting classes, and then that will certify you as a professional parent. You become a professional parent after fostering classes, but then you also have to take 4 more weeks of adoption classes. So you will have all these, and then you can't miss a class. They're very strict. You have to go to all the classes in succession. If you miss, I think we did one. We missed one, and we had to make up one. So they'll be a little bit lenient, but if you miss more than like 1 or 2, then you have to take them all over again. So you have to take that into account. They're very, they come into your house, because I know she won't get to all this specific stuff. Once you become a foster parent, you're beholden to their rules and their regulations, and it's kind of goes along with your home study. They want to come in, they'll go through all your stuff. You have to have a 5-pound fire extinguisher, which I don't know if anybody knows this. You can't have 2 2.5s. You can't have 3 1s. You can't have a 3 and a 2. You can't do that. You have to have a 5-pound fire extinguisher. That's how stringent they are on these rules. But you have to have all these things in place. And it's just simple stuff. You have to have the CO2 emissions. You have to have your fire smoke detector things. They come in and testify, and every 3 months you'll have somebody come to your house and do this. The good news is it is a lot cheaper. Our first adoption was, it was like $7,000, something like that. Domestic adoption is a word. Local adoption is even better. If you go through Kansas City and you go through adoption agencies around here, it gets a lot cheaper. It really does. It can be anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000 depending. But if you do the foster parenting route, they will do your home study for you. Okay, that's a $1,200 to $1,500 cost that they just take. Because you're working for them, they do a lot of work for you. You are working for them. Don't take that into consideration. You're working for the state. They will pay you a very small amount of money to take in kids. They also will cover some of the food and stuff in that aspect when you take in foster children. But in the flip side, you get a lot of stuff for free. They'll do your home study. They keep your home study updated for you. They come in to your house, like I said, every 3 months to make sure everything's in order. They'll ask you follow-up questions to anything that they need.
They pay for your lawyer when you go to court. They will pay for the lawyer for the mother or the parents. They do come every 3 months. The home study thing, though, that didn't stress me out. I guess maybe because I've been through it before, so it didn't really stress me out. No, your house doesn't have to be that clean. We just vacuum stuff. But they do come every 3 months and just kind of update. You do have to have 30 hours of training a year per person. They do provide all those trainings. They're all free to you. But it's just making the time. You're just busy. What else?
As far as foster parenting?
Yeah. So the thing with us is that we decided, yes, we were going to foster to adopt. We became foster parents and actually got our license and stuff on a Friday. And I had told my husband that Saturday, let's set up in our guest bedroom, let's set up a crib and kind of get that stuff going. And Sunday he did it, which was a miracle in itself. And then on Monday we got our first placement, and it was a 7-month-old little boy. And we had him for 7 months? 5 months? 7 months. So that's something they just call you. And you get to choose. I mean, you can say like, I only want children this age. I can only want children this age. Well, we are ages 2 and under, and we do take medical children as well, because I have some medical training. So a lot of our babies that come to our house are like preemies, or our living room starts to turn into a hospital sometimes. But it's been great. We have been foster parents for 6 years. We have had 29 babies go through our home. Only 2 of them have actually gone back to the birth parents. All the rest of them have been adopted, and unfortunately one of them passed away. She was a very ill little baby when she came to us. And we had it was actually an adoption through the Lighthouse we were pursuing adoption both sides. We were looking to foster and adopt, but we did not close the door to the Lighthouse because we were looking to adopt. So we had a finished goal here. So we had our profile out there, and we did have a mother that chose us, and we had a phone call to foster a baby. At the time, we didn't have any babies in our home, just our son. And they had called and asked us to foster her, and she was fetal alcohol syndrome, biracial baby. We couldn't. It was just, our birth mom was in labor, so we just thought that's not going to be good timing. So that was a failed adoption. The birth mom, 24 hours before we went to court, changed her mind. So we have also been through the failed adoption section as well. Anyways, that little infant actually ended up going to a friend of mine, and we actually kind of like sometimes share and help each other out because she does medical babies, and it's just a lot of stress. So she had called me and asked me to care for this little girl a couple times. Her daughter had a baby, so I kept her for the weekend. They went out of town, so I kept her for a week. Yeah, we call that respite care, and you guys can also choose to do that, which is what we do now because we both work full-time. Respite care is like if, the foster family is going to go on vacation, but they don't want to take the infants, they may call you. And it may just be for a weekend, so we do that now. Sometimes it's up to like a week, but it's not usually more than a week that we've ever experienced. It could be longer, but so she had called and asked us if we could care for her for 6 to 8 weeks because she was going to have surgery, and we committed to that. And getting closer to the end of the 8 weeks, she called us crying, and she said, I really just feel like I've been praying a lot, and I feel like maybe she's supposed to stay with you, because a perk to being fostered to adopt is if the baby is in your home, and they may change this a little bit, but if the baby is in your home for up to 9 months, you basically, what we call, you get first dibs. If the baby is in another foster home and you're trying to adopt it, they will actually, they kind of put you in a panel, kind of like in just like a, I don't know, there's just like 10 families that they'll pick out, and then you get chosen. I don't know how you choose parents by just reading profiles, but that's the way that it's done. So they may have changed that a little bit because it's been a couple of years. So we went ahead and committed to taking her on full time, and court after court after court after court after court after court we went to, and they just kept giving the birth mother hope that maybe she was going to get her back. So we would always tease and say we wish we could keep her forever, but we don't know that that's the case. We finally had a meeting that was just it was a mediation meeting, so it was just us, the birth mom, and the mediator, and then on the phone with the speakerphone was like somebody from the state, yeah, that was certified as a lawyer. So we met with her, and during that meeting, the mediator said, is there any way that you might consider, signing over your rights for this family? And she was very, very, it wasn't that this is my daughter, it was this is my property, and I want my property. Like, she didn't see her as a child, she saw her as a piece of property. So during that meeting, we thought, I went in there like shaking, so nervous and just sick to my stomach because I thought this was going to be a mess. But it wasn't. She actually, just her heart just softened, and she just said, I know that, this family has fallen in love with my daughter, and she said I would sign over my rights. So on that day, she decided that she would do that. We went ahead with termination of rights because, don't you cry? You'll make me cry. So we went ahead and just went forward with terminating her rights, which was just like a month away. So, and then we got to adopt on December 22nd of 2010. So now we have 2 children, one that we've adopted through, just kind of going under the board. And then just recently, in the last couple months, we had a friend of a friend, which Nicole was talking about, which is amazing how things happen. We were not seeking to adopt, actually. And we had a relative call me and say, I have a friend that's pregnant, she's looking to adopt. And I said, well, is she needing some resources? Because we have been through so much that a lot of people will come and ask us for resources or, just different stories. And so I said, does she want some resources? Does she want a phone number of a lawyer? Does she want an agency? And she goes, no, I was hoping maybe you guys would be open to it. Well, first I laughed and I thought that's not going to happen. He's not going to want another child. So, funny enough, God has a great sense of humor, and he just went, sure, it's going to be a private adoption. I'm up for that. And it's in Kansas. We've never done a Kansas adoption yet. And so a couple weeks later, they called, and I said, okay, well, we're game. We'll see how this goes. She could change her mind. She may not. We'll just see how it goes. So she called a couple weeks later and said, I just went to the appointment with my friend, and I just want to let you know the babies are fine. And I stopped and I said, did you say babies? And she said, yes, there's 2 of them. So we are now in the process of adopting twins, and they will be born in July, and it's a boy and a girl. So this is a private adoption. So now we're just walking that road. So we might be a family of 6 through adoption. So it's been great. Every single baby that we've ever had in our foster home, I still know how old they would be now. They hold a very, 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 very special. This is where I cry because of 29 babies going through a home, and knowing that all of them have they've been prayed over and they've been sang over, and I just know that their future is obviously not in my hands. I would ask you to talk, but you're going to cry too. It has been an absolute blessing. I mean, just I know it's funny because we're actually laughing going through some of these fertility little things that are out here. James like, stay away from them, because we feel complete. I mean, we really do. We feel like adoption is the path that God has had for us. And to sit up here and tell it to you guys, tell us our story, and just to know that we were meant to do this. This is not what our family is supposed to look like, and we wouldn't have it any other way. We would not want to seek out fertility treatment ever again. We just know that this is what we're supposed to do. So when you finally have peace in your heart, then you know you're doing the right thing.
So, there's that.
Let me see if I can get the right thing with this one. Hopefully, if you want to see, I can find the right one. Okay.
Well, I love how you finished that presentation, because you have peace in your heart, and that is one thing that doesn't come through the infertility journey at first. And that's certainly our prayer for all of you, that you get to where you have that peace in your heart, that you know the Lord has a plan for your family, because He does. He really does. For us, we also touch a lot of bases in here with everybody. We battled with infertility for 6 years and went through the IVF process twice. We were successful both times with our daughters, Olivia and Amelia. And we knew going through all of that adoption had always been placed on our heart. And so for continuing to grow our family, because we knew we just weren't complete yet, we were led down the adoption path as well. We started down the path of domestic adoption and had a couple of very painful failures within that. Again, we just, now that we're on the other side of that, we can see that it was just doors closing so that we head down the right path. And ultimately, we were led to international adoption. I would say that probably one of the biggest things within international adoption is your agency selection. You said it so well at the very beginning, to really interview and make sure that you are working with a group that is like-minded, like-hearted toward the process. You really have to have that strong connection with them because of all of the emotions that are tied within that. So for us, that was very important. We went through an agency called Holt International. They've been doing international adoptions for over 50 years. It was real important for me. I'm a process-minded guy. So I like to know that I can do some things very succinctly. I think all of us can agree, man, if there's one thing that you can cling to where you have maybe a little bit of control over something, that becomes a real heart's desire through all of this. That was certainly mine. So we worked with Holt to do the home study. I'll say something different about home study. I wish every parent in our country had to go through a home study, because they would be significantly more prepared for what they need to do. Our agency was great. They had some parent training classes. I have to confess, we went into it with, I at least went into it with a little bit of pride, thinking, I've got 2 daughters, parenting class. It was the greatest class we've ever gone through, because it talked about some of the emotional things and just the uniqueness of adoption in your family, and how it does require some different things that you have to be in tune with. And so that was great. Our agency was a real blessing to us within that. Ultimately, again, just by following through the path of where we were supposed to go, we ended up going to China and adopting Drew, who you see up there. This is us at the hotel in China right when we got him. So we did travel as a family there. That was a great blessing. We were in China for 17 days. And through that, one of the great blessings that we didn't expect was we really got an appreciation for that culture when we were there, and just learning a little bit more about how others live. It's not like a vacation that you take there. I mean, you're in government offices and you're learning exactly how the inroads work and so forth. So that was a really unique experience for us. But we adopted Drew at 32 months. By far, one of the toughest things with special needs that you go through is you have to select the special needs that you're open for. And that's a really emotional process to go through, because for us, we were thinking, well, I mean, if the Lord has a plan for our family, how do we say no to one of these things? And so we filled that out, and this is where your agency and your social worker is so important, because our social worker, whose name is Judy, got to know us. We filled that out, and we filled out all these special needs that she'd be open to. And she calls me up, and she goes, Rob, got your form that you filled out. And I said, yeah. And she goes, yeah, we need to go through this, because I don't think you guys are prepared for half of this stuff that you put on here. But she helped us think through that process of what we were truly equipped for as a family. And we ended up, Drew is part of the special needs program. It was well said that by and large, a lot of those are very correctable issues. In China, one of the most common is cleft lip, cleft palate. That's specific for China because of some cultural things, but it is, do not be scared of that or have apprehension about that. A good agency will walk you through, what you're equipped for, help you understand the definitions of that and so forth. And that, again, for us, it was a bigger deal in my mind than it really was once we went through it. It seems a great help walking through that. So we adopted Drew at 32 months. We've been back just over a year. And for us and for our family, it has been just an incredible adventure. If anybody is sitting there with apprehension and wondering, wow, could I love an adopted child the way I love a birth child, we can attest to having both in our family. There is absolutely no difference from the moment that you meet them. It's just instant. And so that's just, hopefully that's some encouragement to you, because for us, for our family, we say all the time, we don't remember what life was like before we had Drew. So it is a great experience for us. We would recommend certainly that do the research, get a great agency match, because that is such a key component. When you go into another country and you don't understand any of the language, you don't understand anything that's going on, to have an agency that has a very succinct plan and walking you through that. We did not have one, well, I take that back. There was one time in China where we were extremely uncomfortable because your guide can't fly with you in country, and our flight was canceled. And so figuring that out through signs in Mandarin and so forth was a little bit of a challenge. But other than that, the language barrier wasn't even a major problem for us as we were going through it. Like I said, it was a great experience. If there's one thing that we have learned is if adoption is laid on your heart, I wish that we would have started sooner in going through that process. I will say on the financial side of things, if you're like me and you look at that and you go, $30,000. How does anybody do that? First and foremost, those expenses don't come all at once. And that's a very, very important thing to know. They're broken out as you go through the process. The second thing is, we had about 1/3 of our costs came from grants from different groups that are out there that have a heart for adoption, that look to help with those causes. So we had a matching grant in which we were able to go to our friends and family, and for each dollar that we raised, they matched it. That was a huge portion of the funds that we raised. We did garage sales, bake sales, just a lot of things to involve people within our journey. And through it all, we were just humbled by how many people out there have a heart for families willing to open their homes to children through adoption. So I'd be more than happy to talk with anyone about that financial piece as a whole, because that was something hard for me to get my mind around. So, anything to add to that?
There's two things. I want to back up a little bit too, because we ended up in China, but we initially told God no. We said that stack of paperwork, and China has a dossier, and it's there to protect the children from child trafficking. So there's a reason for that. But when you find an agency that you click with and that has the same values and goals, you'll find they'll take you along that process. And so we saw this huge notebook, but they broke it down, and it was step by step. And so it was done, over the course of time, but it wasn't that we had to take a big bite out of all of that at once. And so we kind of laughed, because God does have a sense of humor. And he did want us to go to China, and he had Drew waiting for us. But it was just a journey there. The grants, that is such a big portion. And we don't want to overwhelm you, but we came with a list of those, just to help get started. But when you do a Google search, you'll be amazed at what's out there, and it's local. And so don't let cost stop you. That's so important. I had one more thing, and it escaped me that I wanted to add here. So we'll just go ahead and pass it along. But we're available for questions, and just to to be able to share all of it, because what is wrapped into Andrew today and our family today, we would never trade that. And I think you kind of hear that from all the families up here. We wouldn't trade this journey that we've been on. And actually that brings me back to the last point is in China, they were so appreciative of the fact that we were there. And so when we did get stuck in the airport and, you know, we were bewildered, we had a lot of locals come up and help us. We couldn't understand them, but we knew they were there to help us. And as we were around and eating out, we had so many that just tried to thank us in the best way they could for adopting him. And so, again, that speaks to the appreciation that we have for his country. So, thank you for your time. And
I'm going to be a little bit shorter on ours, so if you guys have any questions about our journey, just let me know. We, went through infertility for a while, and it came to the time that we had to choose either IVF or adoption, and we just felt that it's time to pursue adoption. We don't want to look at IVF. We might try one more or two more IUIs, but we just aren't ready to do IVF. And so we started looking at agencies. We did all the research. I knew I wanted a newborn. We ended up narrowing down our choices, and we registered with one agency and got the first visit with the social worker. Then we were going on vacation, and we came back, and the social worker had gotten injured and needed surgery. And this was February, and she couldn't do our home study. So then we waited months for our home study to be completed by this certain agency. We finally got our home study completed, which I think is really funny when everybody talks about the fire extinguisher, because we didn't have a fire extinguisher in our house either. And when our son was like 4 months old, I had his bottle warmer in our oven, and I turned the oven on, and we came in from outside, and our oven was on fire. So that fire extinguisher was definitely needed. They know what they're talking about. So we were glad to have it. We registered with them. It was a local agency here in Kansas City, and again, somebody mentioned that the prices do vary widely. So if you use an agency that goes out of state, that's something. Don't think that every adoption is $45,000. And our agency actually does go based off income. So there are agencies, and even one of the agencies that's on this list, if we can ever find the list, in Washington D.C. is based on income. And so if you do have a lower income, don't let that count adoption out for you, because there are different ways. So we registered, we got our home study completed, and we started waiting. In the meantime, as soon as we got our home study completed, it seemed like we started having friends and family call us. This person wants to place their baby for adoption. This person wants to place. We'd get our hopes up, nothing would happen. In October of 2010, a family member had a baby, and it ended up being premature. She was in the NICU, and it was actually our niece, and so we started taking care of her in the NICU because her mom was in the hospital. Her mom couldn't take care of her. Her mom was very sick. And the birth father was with the mom all the time. And we took care of her in the NICU. We needed to bring her home from the hospital because there was nobody to take her home from the hospital. And so we took her home from the hospital. Her mom passed away the day before we brought her home from the hospital, and so then the birth father decided he was going to place her for adoption with us. And we were so excited. At the same time, we were in such grief from the family loss. And she was with us for 2 weeks right before our court date. His family changed his mind, and he took her back home with them. So we've been through an adoption where we brought the baby home, know the laws, and know that even if it's not that kind of a crazy situation like ours was, know what you're getting into, because you don't want to bring a baby home thinking it's yours and then realize there's something that hasn't been done. But that wasn't the case with us. We knew we could lose her, but that was heartbreaking. And then, so that was November of 2010, and in April of 2011, we got a call from another friend. My daughter is pregnant again. She doesn't think she can parent this baby. She wants to choose adoption. Are you guys still wanting to adopt? And we're like, yeah. And my best friend showed up shortly after we got that phone call, and I'm like, that was just another random "do you want my baby" call. Because I was so jaded at that point. I was just like, you can call us and tell us, but nothing. I mean, we're just waiting for a placement through our agency. And then I talked to the birth mom. They came for dinner. I went to all her doctor's appointments with her. It was challenging to go with her to all the doctor's appointments and know that this baby still might not come home with us, but I'm so thankful for that time. We got to be there. She hadn't had any medical care, so we got to be there when we found out what the baby was, which was super exciting. And then she had planned to have a C-section, she needed to have a C-section, and so we thought we knew what day he was gonna come, and a week early, she knew in Jackson County, you needed to go to court on Monday to try to bring the baby home, or the baby needed to be born on Monday to hopefully go to court on Wednesday so the baby could come straight home from the hospital with you. So I told her we need to schedule our C-section on Monday so we could do this. She was all about it. And because she didn't want the baby to go in cradle care, she wanted the baby to come home with us. And so we have the schedule, June 13th, he's gonna be born. And June 6th, I get a phone call. She's crying on the phone, and we supposedly had a doctor's appointment that Wednesday, and she says, the baby's here, you need to come to the hospital. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know at that point. I'm like, she was supposed to call us when the baby came. She didn't call us. That probably means she's changing her mind. We were so scared. We got to the hospital here in Kansas City. This was a day, like, I don't know what had happened, but it was a Monday, and so neither of us had, like, I hadn't put on makeup. He hadn't taken a shower that morning. It was like I'm like, here we are at the hospital looking raggedy. And we got in there, and they wheeled the baby down to our room, and the birth grandma placed him with us, and our son Tucker was born. I didn't even switch the picture. He's the little dark-haired one in our picture that is feisty beyond belief. So that was June of 2011, and we were in the hospital for 48 hours. We cared for him from the time he was born. We had a great experience with the hospital staff. Birth mom would take him occasionally. That was a very stressful period, but we're so thankful we had that time with him from the very beginning. He went to court, and he's been with us ever since. Birth, I haven't heard from the birth mom for when she found out I was pregnant, she called and was super excited for us. It was really funny. Then I haven't heard from her since. So birth grandma does see Tucker occasionally, so we like that relationship. It's nice to be able to have. And like everybody else has said, I mean, when you have, I always wanted to ask that question, biological versus adopted. Am I ever going to feel any different? And there's no difference. Oftentimes I get confused and I'll say, oh, I wonder if Tanner's our baby. I wonder if Tanner's birth parents had this certain issue. And then I'm like, oh wait, that would be us. I know if Tanner's birth parents had that certain issue. So, and it does, I think Jason mentioned it in the men tell all, but I was psychotic when I was pregnant about doing everything perfectly. Tucker's birth mom smoked, she drank Mountain Dew, like she didn't drink water, she just drank Mountain Dew. I mean, she was very, very rough. When she first found out she was pregnant, she tried everything she could to miscarry. And Tucker seems to be in complete health. He's smart as can be. And I did everything imperfectly, and Tanner was born with a major heart problem and had to have open heart surgery last year. So you don't know what you're going to get. So don't be too scared, like everybody else has said, of those special needs or some of the substances. Again, I have a list around here that I'm hoping I can find somewhere to give you guys, because there is a ton of information that I put together for you. Do you have anything you want to add about our story?
Yeah, so any fears you have, you can talk to any of us. We can talk to you about those, or get a hold of us through the website or whatnot. But yeah, it's quite a journey. It's incredible what we went through with the kids, and like my wife told me several times, she goes, I probably could have had a really healthy baby if I just went and smoked crack. But that was one big thing that scares me. But everything was wonderful, and God definitely does have a plan for you.
Now, we all talked way long, so that whole question thing is probably not going to happen. But if there's a few, like 2 or 3 questions that you're just burning questions that you want to know, please jump up and ask them really quick. Anybody? Yes. We were, let's see, Tucker's 3 years old, so I would have been 34 when he was born, so 33, 34. He's 3 years older than me, so we were in our mid-30s, let's say.
Late 30s.
27.
And there are some agencies, if you're, like a lot of them, if you're 50-ish, they're not as interested in working with you. But there are still agencies that will. And China also has some myths out there about they won't work with this person, they won't work with that person. Investigate those myths, because a lot of it is this buffaloing that they try to do, but then when it comes down to it, you can still adopt, so, yeah.
On the international side of things, each country that we investigated does have a combined age for the couple. So they look at it as a collective age that they do, and there is a limit within that.
Anybody else? Well, grab us. If you have questions afterwards. I really wish I could find that picture. Oh yeah, they did, it's right here. That's nice. I'm going to stretch it up. Yeah. This has grant information. I went through and researched the grants, and so there's a ton of grant information in here too about the what? The IRS. So just contact us if you have any questions, because we will all be happy to answer them. And as you go through the process, if you need somebody to talk to, we're all here for that too. So thank you guys so much. I hope if you've already started on the journey and you're waiting that your baby comes soon, and if you're still considering it, then I hope